it's a short lead time, which is great for PR. As you know, something can happen last minute. Client might need to get the message out as soon as possible. Our turnaround time can be 24 hours. We do ask for more lead time, obviously, but it can be done for those last minute campaigns. And it's affordable. So I'm here basically to change your mindset. Everyone thinks, radio is so expensive. But you know what? I can give you a solution that's 20,000 Rand, and I can give you a solution that's 20 million Rand, okay? It's all about how we are, what the solutions we can create for you, and how creatively we can get that message across to the consumer. So please change your mind. It's not expensive. It can be, but it can also be affordable. And then, as I mentioned, works extremely well with digital. If you just think of your day-to-day behavior, it makes absolute sense. So why Primedia Broadcasting? So you've got radio, but you've got all these options of various radio stations. So as you can see, we are very, very proud to be working for the brands we do. And I can go on and on about how wonderful we are and whatever, but I think it's more important to chat to you about how is it relevant to you. And the relevance is that we have strong brands, big personality, we do events, we do research and insights, everything is done in-house. And I think that's a big selling point for you guys, because you come to us and we can assist you across all platforms, within all departments, may it be on air, events and activations, digital, research, you name it. So come to us and we'll assist you accordingly. More importantly, CSI initiatives. I know that this is a big thing for PR. So if you have clients that is very passionate about a certain nonprofit, please chat to us and we'll see how we can assist you in giving clients the exposure they need. But enough from me. I'd like to now hand you over to Kwena, who's going to take you into research and insights.
I'll be taking you through the tools that we use and how these can benefit you guys. So the first tool that we have is Talma. So Talma is a software we use for media planning. It uses BRC data, which is the industry currency. And we use two sections in this tool, which is TNT as well as Radio Max. So on Radio Max, we run reach and frequency projections for your campaigns. This can be to reach any target audience on any radio station. So if you already have a radio plan, we can run it for you so that you know what kind of performance you can expect. This tool also allows us to build plans for you. So if you don't have a radio plan, we can build optimized plans for you, which will give you your desired performance at the most cost-effective way possible. We also have radio packages that we've already built for certain categories. For example, we have on-peak and off-peak retail packages already built for you. On the second section, which is TNT, we get demographic data on listeners as well as radio information such as listening patterns, radio stations listen to, exclusive listenership, time spent listening, and many other information. So we use this data to provide you with station profiles, which will help you understand the kind of listeners a station attracts, and we can even break this down to show level. And this will also include information on specific features, for example, fresh deeds on the afternoon drive and so forth. So we're also able to compare our stations with competitors to see if we have the kind of listeners that you're looking for. We can also do duplication analysis, which will tell you which stations share listeners so that you can put together a better station mix for your campaigns. We also do target market analysis and heat maps, which show you where your desired audience is concentrated so that you know which shows to focus on in order to meet your objectives. So the next tool is TGI. So on TGI, we get both demographics and psychographics of consumers. So we also get a lot of product and brand data. We're able to understand consumers' behavior, product and brand usage, as well as their attitudes towards different things such as charity, saving, DIY, and anything that you can think of, really. There's a lot of information here. And this will obviously help you in the kind of messaging that you put out to these people. The tool is also used by a majority of the top 50 advertisers and media owners in the country. So, it's very credible. And there are a lot of categories available. So there's food, toiletry, sports, pharmaceuticals, automotive, and many more, anything that you can think of. So we use this tool to find out the likelihood of listeners of any radio station to do something or buy a certain brand. So on the slide, you'll see that we recently ran ownership of property on our stations for a property company that wanted to see just how likely our listeners are to purchase a property. The next tool that we have is Ariana. So Ariana is a post-campaign analysis tool which will give you the exact performance of your campaign once it ends. Remember, on Radio Max, we give you a projection of your performance, but then once your campaign ends, Ariana will be able to give you the exact performance. Okay, so some of you might be familiar with Tracker, which also provides the same service, but Ariana is faster and better because it only has a 48-hour lag, while Tracker has a 4-week lag. And this tool also allows you to filter by shows, category, advertiser, or product, and you can run this for other radio stations on which your campaign ran as well. So it's not just limited to our stations. The next exciting tool that we have is Veritone. So this is our attribution model. So we have partnered with Veritone to bring you this amazing attribution solution that allows us to measure the impact of radio on online traffic. So this helps us to prove that radio does actually drive online activity. So before this, we had no way of actually proving this. Now, this tool allows us to give you a report that will show you just how many of your visits were because of radio. So this solution is free for our clients, as long as you're running a campaign on our stations, obviously. And it gives you insight into the best stations, format, duration, creative, day of the week, time of the day to drive maximum online response. So this is how it works. We send Veritone our flighting data. So a day after your spot airs, we will send them the data, and then they will use this together with your Google Analytics to attribute visits that fall in a time window to radio. So you will have to grant Veritone access to your Google Analytics, but this is just read and analyze access only. So they won't edit your data or mess up anything. So the standard time is 8 minutes outside of drive time and 25 minutes in drive time, obviously to allow people enough time to respond because they're most likely on the road at this time. So if a click happens within 8 minutes of a spot playing outside of drive time or 25 minutes in drive time, then that visit is attributed to radio. Okay. The best type of campaigns that will work on this attribution model are those that have a strong call to action to web. It has to ask our listeners to visit your website, otherwise it will not work. It has to have a compelling offer, so maybe visit our website to get a free consultation or something like that. It has to have a sense of urgency, and it also has to have mass appeal. That's it from me. I don't know. I'm happy to take any questions now.
Thank you, Kwena. Guys, any questions?
No, I think that was very clear. None from my side. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Then next up, it's going to be Kagiso, who's going to take you through the latest consumer listenership, listener behavior.
Good day, everyone. So I'll be talking about the research aspect of the business. So what we do have is an internal panel called Prime Connect with a capacity of 10,000 listeners across our 4 stations and our news platform called EWN. So what we do offer clients through Prime Connect is understanding consumer behavior, evaluation of products and services, and ad testing. So to see how our listeners react to ads, whether they like it or not, just to mention a few. And what we did do during the lockdown is we wanted to keep in touch with our listeners. So during the different levels of lockdown, we wanted to know what their headspace is at and also to understand their behavior. So what we did find out is that our listeners are concerned about the economy. It is no secret that the COVID-19 has had a negative impact on the economy. So that is one of the major concerns of our listeners. Our listeners are also concerned about job losses, as most companies are retrenching and also most companies are closing. And also our listeners who are parents are concerned about schools reopening. So they're concerned about their children's safety, but they also want the children to finish the academic year. Our listeners across all the 4 stations are also have financial concerns, with 7 out of 10 listeners stating that COVID-19 has impacted them financially. So we also wanted to find out, are people still listening to radio? So Kantar conducted research in May to find out the media landscape in South Africa. And as you can see, internet surfing, social networks, and instant messaging have increased significantly during lockdown. But what we're also seeing is that streaming music and podcasts have also increased by 40%. Radio consumption has increased by 28%, and online and streaming radio has increased by 24%. So what the problem with the pandemic is that people feel isolated, they feel lonely, the anxiety levels are increasing. I think it's normal for human beings to want to interact with other human beings. So what they're doing now is they're looking to radio to meet this need, where they're experiencing shifts from individualism towards collectivism. And radio is a great platform, like Lishan has already mentioned. It connects listeners to their communities. And during this time also where people feel lonely, radio is there to be their friend, where they can vent, where they can also engage with their favorite presenters, with 70% of people agreeing that radio makes them feel in touch with the world, while 46% of them agree that radio makes them feel more connected to the community, while 44% says that it makes them feel less alone. And just feeding into it, we wanted to understand how our listeners are listening to radio during this time. So 40% of our listeners are agree that they're still listening to more radio during the lockdown, while 35% state that they didn't change their listening behavior during lockdown. 24%, however, have increased their online and radio streaming behavior, which is similar to the Kantar results, where online and radio streaming has increased by 24%. Our listeners have also increased their podcast usage by 20%. And looking into radio listenership during the week, most of our listeners state that they listen to the radio every day of the week. And what was interesting to see was that when the government eased down the lockdown regulations in level 3 and more people were going to work, we saw that in-car listening increased from level 5 to level 3 by 19%, while normal AM and FM radio listening stayed the same. Mobile device listening also stayed the same. What we also saw is that our listeners from level 5 to level 3 decreased their TV consumption by 6%. And then looking at the times that they listen to radio, we can see that most of our listeners are tuning in much later during the week, as some are still working from home, but the listenership stays stable during the day. What we're seeing is that we see a peak at lunchtime. So this is where people now have time to relax and eat lunch. So they're tuning into radio to catch up on the news and what is happening around the world. What we see also is a peak at afternoon drive, where most people are driving back from work. So this is more similar to early morning listenership. And then what topics, we asked our listeners what topics they'd like to hear with regards to COVID-19 on the radio. So if they want to hear the impact COVID-19 has on the economy and business, they also want secondary income ideas, as most people have had their income cut, or also most people lost their jobs. They also want to hear COVID-19 updates in terms of the numbers and cases. But what is interesting to see is that due to the fact that COVID-19 has had an impact on people's mental health, our listeners would like to hear guidance and advice on how to deal with their mental health during this time. And then we asked them, what are they doing to relax or remain entertained during lockdown level 3? What our listeners are doing is that they are baking, listening to radio, what was also interesting to see is that they're exercising at home. They're also completing DIY projects or small passion projects. And then the key insights that we found is that as more people go back to work, radio listening patterns are starting to normalize, and in-car listening is utilized more frequently now. But we also see that our listeners are more concerned about their health, finances, and unemployment. But interesting enough is that now that we're on level 2, hopefully this will ease down the concerns and also concerns about finances and unemployment. And also as more social activities are opening up, hopefully this will also help them with their social activities and also with their mental health. And lastly, mental health and wellness are becoming increasingly important to our listeners as lockdown progresses. So listeners would like to hear more about coping strategies as well as ways in which they could recover from the impact of COVID-19. Thank you. And any questions?
Thank you so much, Kagiso. Any questions from Tribeca?
I have a question or a thought. I'm not sure which one of the two it is. So obviously with financial concerns being quite a big thing for consumers at the moment, is now the right time to be kind of punting your products and pushing people to purchase products at a time where financial concerns are a real thing?
So I think...
You go, Ishan.
No worries. I think it's just, you need to be cognizant of the way in which you say things. It's all about packaging it up in senses more in a, we understand, empathy kind of feel. And don't forget, I know people are stressed financially, but at the end of the day, our audience across all 4 of our stations are of the higher income group, so they are still able to spend and splurge a little bit.
Okay.
If anyone else wants to jump in to answer that question.
Yeah, I think you are right. Like you mentioned, our listeners are more LSM 8 to 10, so they do still have little income to spend. And it's also about just offering tailored like products and solutions to them. So also understanding what their needs are and then offering those tailored solutions to them.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty. So next is Linda, which is Head of Creative Solutions. Mal, show us the magic.
How's it, everyone? It's so great to be here, and thanks for having us. And it is absolutely the part of the business that I think is the coolest part to work, because we are central to absolutely every function in the business with regards to our offerings to our clients. And so where the creative solutions, we call it internally CS, is also a central service. And it's so ironic because we sit in the middle of where programming, presenters, production, and sales are. And so we get to kind of glue things together that is exciting, different, and we get to push the boundaries. So what we like to think of ourselves of, let's just see there, it's sort of like well, I suppose we're arrogant enough or fun enough or brave enough to think we're superheroes. But it is absolutely where we get to come up with this stuff that hopefully blows our listeners' minds on a day-to-day basis. And we go about it in a very strategic way. And so what comes out on the other side often sounds sort of just natural or easy, and it just flows. And we just have such amazing presenters who make these things come alive. But it's an energy and a synergy between all of these departments that I mentioned and us working closely with you, the clients, and you as an agency, and vicariously then your set of clients. And so we have a little process, and it's a very straightforward process. And I think the tough stuff in life doesn't need to be complicated stuff. It generally ends up being very simple things just done very well. I have little kids that are watching the Bee movie ad nauseum at the moment, and it's so interesting. It's like everyone has a small job, and when you do it well, everything works, and it's so true in every aspect of life. So when you take a brief, it's all about unpacking what you need, what your client needs, what that budget is, when you want to be on air, and all the normal sort of information. But what is so important to us is that when we meet in what we call a creative council session, we are in that session with all of those stakeholders that I mentioned. So you've got the programming managers in there, the production heads, the digital team, the CS guys, the sales guys. And so you're so well surrounded in that internal sessions. We regularly even have our clients participating in those sessions because they are so unbelievably dynamic, and it's an open invitation to take part in those when we go through our ideation phase. And we start off by working with research and insights. And it's very important because, as you know, we all live in our own little bubble. And so for us to understand the audience at large, building and tapping into the insights like Kagiso and Kwena shared with you, those are like magic nuggets that enable ideas to have far more stickiness than just me or Dean or 947 or whoever to come up with an idea and think, oh yeah, that's the coolest idea of the world. It has to have an impact and a resonance and something that makes the listener perk up. And so it's important for us to always look at data. Now, then we document that proposal, and usually every single proposal that you will get, unless there's an absolutely short turnaround, will have schedules and costing attached to it. We then present you with that solution and make tweaks. And that's the fun part. That's when we get to have a meeting of the minds with regards to what we think could work based on the information supplied, and then where that has inspired you, because there's no such thing as the first idea is the best idea. And so step 5 is very accelerating, where we get to make those final tweaks to get it absolutely perfect before we then process that contract and get to what I believe is the most important link in this chain as a service to you, and that is our delivery. For us to get every step right from 1 through to 6 and fail on the execution and on the delivery of our ideas or our campaigns, that's where we will fall flat. And so we have the most amazing project management team that implement these crazy wild ideas that we come and think of, and they make them come alive on air. And they work very, very closely again with programming to make those things come through the speaker the side we imagine them. Then we debrief and we do a post-campaign, and those conversations are exhilarating because they generally help us find growth areas. We start the conversation for what's next and where can we grow and evolve from together. Now, within these ideas, idea is quite a vague and an open-ended statement to make. We have a certain set of armor or tools, or we call them an ecosystem essentially, that works all together in the harmony that we will then strategize. So at the Creative Council session, we would have already allocated an exclusive strategist that will own that project, and that person, alongside the whole support of the team, will use whichever elements are best suited, and to Leishan's point, within the means of this particular brief, in other words, the budget and the objective, and find a way to make all of those things collide. And so it can be anything from a competition, a content campaign, whether it's integrated or native or quite overt content. We do, Dean will touch more on all of the digital assets and what sort of the showcase there looks like. But then we obviously do events and activations, which is a really fun thing for us and one we'd love to do more of in the near future. And then presenter endorsements, outside broadcasts, just the fun stuff. Getting to take the brand to our clients, bring our clients' brands to the listeners. And so we love tapping into our presenters because that's ultimately who you have a relationship with, right? You don't have a relationship with the billboard on corner of William Nicol and Stanton Drive. You're not going to, your heart doesn't flutter, your chest doesn't beat with joy, or your emotions aren't tickled. You're not nodding your head in frustration of a news story. But you do that emotively engage with radio and with the presenters that bring you those content. And you laugh and you hoot and you have a good time with them because they make it come alive. And so using them is an absolutely powerful way, especially in the space that you play in. So content integration is obviously a key thing for us, and it's strategically a very big focus for us in the next year to come. We've already done a number of very successful and efficient campaigns for our advertisers in this space, and I'm going to take you through examples because I'd like to share with you what we've done to give you a sort of sense of what they could look like and how to maybe start conversations with Leishan and the team. And so we look at your brand and your objective, what the listener insights are with regards to that message that you're after or that impact that you're looking to make with them, and then what are the stations, opportunities that you can exploit. So where are the pockets of obvious affinities, resonances, etc. And in the middle, that small little middle part, that's where absolute magic happens. There's magic all over the place, but in that very special part in the middle, that's where we get to do the most coolest stuff. And it leads me straight into telling you a campaign that we're currently running that I believe sits right there in the middle. So Dove came to us a few weeks ago, well, months actually. It's been a long project in the making. And they're running a national campaign that some of you might have heard or seen called #CourageIsBeautiful. And it's the most emotive, amazing campaign, especially in the times that we're in. And they've got essentially a helpline where you can get all kinds of help and advice, whether it is for abuse or depression or, many sort of difficult times that people are facing of many different shapes. And they wanted to create some awareness about this because they want you to not feel ashamed of if you are depressed or you need to speak to someone about how you're feeling. There's absolutely no shame in it, and Dove wants people to feel courageous and brave and proud of speaking about their truth. So they had this conversation with us, and this is a perfect example of integrated native content where they said, we've got these amazing partners, ambassadors, experts of fields, different fields that have partnered with our call center and with our cause. And we want to tell these stories. We want to tell the stories of victims or the stories of those who have survived or those who are busy working on themselves, etc. How can we do that? And now traditionally, as Primedia, we absolutely pride ourselves in protecting our products, and it's very important for us to make sure that that product remains intact so that advertisers continue wanting it. Nothing is more dangerous than having a platform and abusing it to a point of no recognition. And so we take great caution when we start talking about editorial spaces, and this is that. And I thought this might be a type of a campaign that you'd like to follow in the weeks to come, considering the spaces that you play in. And so there's a feature that Azania does every week already, and it's called Navigating COVID-19, and it's a feature that brings through all kinds of utility, coping mechanisms, great advice, parenting tips, how to protect your child, masks, blah, all kinds of things. And we're doing a sub-series called Courage is Beautiful with Dove, where their experts are becoming our experts and replacing our usual experts for 6 weeks. And so we do a lot of these kind of things, and I think it's time that we share them with you, especially if we haven't embarked on something with you, that you know that if you're working on something that is so content driven and you're looking for a platform where you believe that the editorial value is there, start that conversation with us. Our programming team are always very open and happy to engage. And so that's what we're doing for, I think it's 4 weeks left to go. We've already done 2 of the weeks. Sanlam I Madiba is an example slightly older, just again another campaign where Sanlam had embarked on this beautiful piece, pieces, I suppose, of art around the country, Cape Town and Joburg, where it's inspired sort of through the legacy of conversation of Madiba, and they wanted to create conversation areas. And I'm going to play you a little video so you can get a break from my voice for a second.
Mel, we also can't hear the sound unless it's me.
Oh, again the sound.
Mandela was imprisoned in an 8.
Is that working?
For most of his incarceration.
Perfect.
Nelson Mandela was imprisoned in an 8 by 7 foot concrete cell. Despite everything, his spirit and vision were never confined to it, and his ideology of conversation, compassion, and compromise has remained boundless. Erhard Thiel, a South African artist, had a vision for a living work of art where the spirit of Madiba could thrive in a micro space through macro conversations. In partnership with the Nelson Mandela Foundation and Sanlam, 21 conversational spaces have been created thus far. Primedia Broadcasting became involved in facilitating, capturing, and promoting key elements of the Sanlam I Madiba project as part of an ongoing endeavor to maintain the Nelson Mandela heritage. Hosted by 2 of Primedia Broadcasting's foremost presenters and influencers, Africa Milani and Joanne Joseph, key players were invited to participate in a series of robust conversations. These took place at significant
I'm going to stop it there in the interest of time, but I think it gives you a good indication of sort of the production that went into it behind the scenes, and then this campaign rolled out with all of these sort of pieces, and I think it was just amazing. A great thought leadership environment that we could create for Sanlam, which is what they were after, showcasing sort of their willingness to create this inclusivity and conversation and propelling our country forward even more. And just, again, a special piece of work that we would never have passed up. It just made complete sense for who our audiences are, the kind of stuff they're interested in, and then what Sanlam wanted out of it. So a great partnership there. So let's look at some of the stuff that we are still to do. You wouldn't have heard this on air yet. It is still to launch. And so Joburg Day, also K-Day, we have 3 music festival events each year, as you might know, and they're very special to us. We absolutely love them. It brings together 20,000 of our listeners 3 times a year, and we just all have an absolute joy. So we were scheduled to have that very Joburg Day this September, and sadly, we are not able to yet, but we couldn't have asked for a cooler, funner, more daring partner than Teresa from Huawei, and she has nothing that will stop her from trying new things and opening herself up to a little bit of risk and try pushing boundaries, and also in keeping with their brand tone, just a really fun client to work with. So they said to us, what are we doing? Joburg Day is coming up. We missed May. There was no time for us to reinvent the wheel or rescope at the time of lockdown in March with a month to go. What are we going to do for September? And so we are going to be doing virtual Joburg Day. But I want to speak for a moment about where Insights as an example plays a role. So there's a lot of virtual events that you can attend and music that you can watch, and lots of our South African and local international artists are all making concerts. Some you pay for, some are free. But our data has shown us that listener data, streaming data, is expensive. And it's very difficult for them to attend these on a regular basis, even though they might be interested. It's just costing a lot of money. And not everybody lives in a Sandton bubble with uncapped internet. And we need to be mindful of that. And with 1 million listeners, we have to be particularly acutely aware of this. And so for this year, we're very excited because we are going to bring this amazing virtual Joburg Day, not only virtually, digitally, where you can physically experience the bands, but also in an audible sense, radio, which is our bread and butter. Super exciting we'll have on air on the radio. So if you don't have data to watch the bands play, guess what? You don't need to. You just need to tune into Fresh. And we are going to jam together on Joburg Day. Watch your office, watch your home. So really exciting campaign line. Fun. Thank you. Another example of a content campaign. So this was something that I'm going to share with you as well. It's a fairly new product, and it's something that took a different shape on, but it was called the Great Cuddle Off. And essentially, Dial a Bed was launching a new bed. We started a story arc on radio the day before about who's the best cuddler. Do you a small spoon, big spoon? Do you even spoon your partner? Do you touch each other? Don't you touch each other? How do people sleep? And some people are cuddlers, some people aren't. It was just an amazing story arc by Breakfast Club, and it just super authentic. We had Celeste and Thuli, as part of the content, and it was hilarious and fun about people's sleeping habits and behaviors. And Anelia then ended up saying, well, I think we need to find the best cuddler in Joburg, and so let's chat about let's get beds in studio and let's have a cuddle off. At that stage is when we announced Dial a Bed. 40 Winks is going to be the bed that we're going to be using, and they were launching, and just a really nice integrated launch of native positioning, and overwhelmed us. A 2-day campaign with reach on social media far beyond our expectations. And yeah, so I'm going to jump into some of the new stuff. 2 new things really, and they both speak to product placement. So similar to what I've just showed you with Cuddle Off, there's this amazing opportunity now once a week where a client can request this. So if you have a product that you want to have a conversation about, you want the Breakfast Club to talk about it, just talk about it in their own way, and then have the listeners engage with that conversation. Now in radio world, we would usually call it a phoner, but in a client world, it's product placement, right? So we've created this as a very exclusive once a week opportunity, and something that Lishan can share more information with you after this if you're interested in it, but a really new special offering. And we've got some audio with a past client with Old Gold that you can listen to see how that's come alive. Seriously Shannon is another one of those, and I am going to, this happens on a daily basis. He always does this feature, and I'm going to play you a piece of audio to just show you how it comes alive. This was an example of a client already integrated in his daily feature. Also, once a week, there's an opportunity to have your brand placed there.
Hey Siri, I have some delicious weirdness for your Thursday afternoon. Have you seen that Take-A-Lot is now selling coffins?
Seriously?
Normally priced at 5,500 Rand, you can get a brand new coffin for the reduced and very reasonable price of 4,899 rands.
So while you order your electric blanket, your pots and pans, and shoes, you can also tick final resting place off the shopping list?
Exactly. Times are changing, Siri, but what I can't wait for is the influencer campaign. Because you know, with any product these days, you have to give it to the influencers with the followers to get the clout out there. Yo guys, it's Party Thrower 217 here, and I just want to tell you about how awesome the new coffin from Take-A-Lot is. You buy one of these, then you get 6 guys to be pallbearers, play this, and you have the perfect 2020 Halloween costume. Sick. Highly recommend.
In the interest of time, I'm going to stop it there, and you can ask Lishan to send it to you afterward, but gives you a good idea of how just a really fun story arc. Trust us, these guys know what they're doing, and we could integrate your clients' products in a very fun way.
Hey Siri.
Guys, that's me.
Deep your presentation and take us through what your department has to offer.
All right, cool. Thanks so much, Lishan. Hi, everyone from Tribeca. Thanks so much for making time. I'm conscious of time, so we've got 10 minutes. So I'm going to keep it brief so that we can have a couple of questions at the end as well. So my name is Dean Schroeder. I look after the commercial digital opportunities at Primedia Broadcasting, which is the 4 radio stations as well as EWN. So this is a lovely little cheat sheet that we love sharing with clients at the end of every single month. So if ever you want to know what our ecosystem looks like in terms of scale and opportunity, this is a lovely guide to have on hand at any point in time. Gives you the radio audiences, the social audiences, the activity on the website, apps, in the number of people that have downloaded the apps to date, people that are streaming, as well as YouTube subscribers. So just 2 points over here. EWN, one of the biggest websites in the country. We actually saw fantastic growth month in and month out of COVID. So in March, we were at 4.5 million users on the site, and now in July, 5.7 million. So it's actually continuously grown even after that initial spike of activity that we saw across media around the level 5 lockdown. And then also Cape Talk. Oftentimes people think radio is a very, very expensive medium to be on, but Cape Talk really is an inexpensive place to operate. And on top of it, it has the most affluent radio audience in the country. But beyond just the radio audience there's also a really highly engaged digital audience. And for the last 2 or 3 months, we've actually seen Cape Talk outperforming 702 in terms of the number of users and page views that are delivered on the Cape Talk site. So think of Cape Talk more than just a small little regional radio station, but think about it as something that you can do some really cool stuff that engages a really great audience. Like I've mentioned, we've seen growth, and I'm not going to spend too much time here, but just to say that there's been consistent growth across the organization month in, month out. And even for a brand as big and powerful as EWN, we've seen massive, massive growth of 65% year on year. But one thing, numbers are one thing, who those people are is probably more important to you as well as to our clients and our other partners. So we have access to a wonderful tool that we can build demographic reports for our audiences. And this is probably the simplest report that we can pull, but we can do very creative things. And if you have any ideas of cool reports to pull to try and better understand our digital audiences, please let us know and we'll make that happen for you. But for example, on 947, we can see that 40% claim to be first language English speakers. Majority of people that listen to 947 are in Gauteng. 40% claim to be married, 21% have undergrad degrees, 61% are fully employed full-time, 10% fall into senior management, and 39% have access to fiber. Now, interestingly enough, those bottom four little stats really do reinforce the fact that 947 is positioned as the largest regional radio station in Gauteng that also engages a highly affluent and engaged audience, that SEM 7 to 10. We've also started playing around with some fun new tools, I think, as everyone has. What started as tools that we did some internal comms with has evolved into client-centric campaigns. So we creating some webinars. The first one we did was for Vox, where we spoke about working from home as the new normal, hosted by Aki. We had the CEO of Vox there. We had a business coach from Gibbs, and we had a psychologist, really just to talk about internet usage, the dynamics of working from home, homeschooling, etc., etc. It's a really lovely environment, I think, especially from a PR and comms perspective, to delve deeply into content. Oftentimes, clients want to spend an hour talking about their content and their business, but we don't have the room or the space to do that within the radio environment, but we could do that within a webinar environment. So one of the big sort of buzzwords has been digital audio streaming across the media landscape, because more people are listening to audio digitally. And what does it look like? We can get instant feedback in terms of listenership numbers. So it's been really, really interesting to see the growth, as well as the growth in terms of an appetite to engage in this from an advertiser's perspective. Again, it's an inexpensive way to get into a quote unquote radio environment and engage a highly engaged audience. Interestingly enough, 62% are actually listening via their desktop, which, if you understand what the person might be doing at that point in time, is they're on Google Chrome, for example, on their computer, answering emails, listening to Dean talk about digital stuff whilst pretending to be in a meeting. And if you have a compelling message, you are one click away from opening up another window and buying that pair of shoes on Superbalist. Again, we've seen great growth across the streams year in, year out, but most importantly, the digital audio streaming audience is at significant scale. It's not like there are 10 or 15 people listening to it at any point in time. In the last month, we saw 600,000 people listening to the audio streams, which is a 40% growth year on year. And on average, people are listening to these streams for about an hour every session. This is just an interesting view of like the listenership patterns, like when it's busiest on radio versus when it's busy on streaming. And there was always this suspicion at a point in time that, radio and streaming are competing for share of ear, I guess. But the reality is, when you overlay the two graphs, even though it's not to scale, what you actually find is that those people that love 947, for example, will listen to it in the car on the way to work. And as soon as they get to their desk at work, they're going onto the 947 website or clicking on the 947 app and listening to the station, which again is important in terms of thinking about where the users are at any point in time, because you can use radio to drive very high. In this break, the break that's happening on the radio, we can actually replace ads so that you could potentially hear a completely different set of ads on the digital audio stream compared to what you hear on the terrestrial radio. We also recommend a gap between a single advertiser's material of 20 minutes, so as to not annoy audiences. And also, we know that people are listening for roughly an hour, so they could potentially hear your messages 2 to 3 times. Again, like I mentioned earlier, a really cost-effective way to get into a radio environment when you're dealing with a CPM rate of 240 Rand. Podcasts, fastest growing media type in the world in terms of audience and in terms of revenue. We're an audio business, and we've been in podcasting for a number of years. The Money Show has actually been going as a podcast for about 9 or 10 years already. So we've been committed to this for a very long time, and we've invested in tools, resources, and capabilities to make sure that this is not just some fly-by-night operation, but something that is robust, significant, and at scale. So in the last 12 months, we've been able to accrue just under 9 million downloads across all of our content. We have 40,000 subscribers to all of the content. The majority of people are listening via their mobile devices. Similar to audio streaming, we saw increased growth due to the impacts of COVID-19 and things starting to normalize now. But what you can see over the last 12 months, there was consistent upward growth. The only dip was in December, because I don't know if you guys remember, December 2019, many, many years ago, when we were allowed to go out and allowed to go to holidays and stuff like that. Further to that, we make sure we understand who the audiences are, where they're listening, how they're listening, and this is the information that we can get out of our tool. But sometimes with these analytic tools, they are just that, they're very analytical. But what we do is we reach out to our research and insights teams for additional data to almost like supplement the primary data. So the tool can tell us the devices and whether they're using Android or iOS, but can't tell us how old those people are, what's their employment status, what SEM group they are, their gender, or their racial breakdown. So we're able to supplement primary data with secondary data from digital tools to Prime Connect. Again, from a commercial opportunity here, it's really affordable to get into these spaces with pre-rolls and post-rolls. We also sell this on a CPM basis. And the nice thing to know that if we take audio from the radio and cut it up and publish it as a podcast, we actually remove all the ad breaks. So for example, if you listen to the Best of the Azania Masaka show, you wouldn't hear ad breaks, which is important for advertisers when it comes to podcast environment, because if you are inserting pre-rolls and post-rolls, you're not competing with any other advertisers in that podcast for that listener. So technically for a one-to-one, for one listener, your client may have 100% share of voice whilst they listen to that one piece of content. And that's it from me. Short, sweet, simple, and in time. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Dean. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean.
All right. The team from Tribeca, do any of you have questions for Dean on the digital offerings?
No questions from me. This has been really interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so I hope you guys did find this, like you said, interesting, Caitlin. And just a reminder that obviously we would like to have breakaway sessions with the various portfolios to see where we can help you. But set these up one for those of you that would like to have this discussion. And then we'll be sending this through to you at a later stage. And then that's basically it from us here at Primedia. Thanks again for all your time. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.